There is a kind of strength that is so quiet, so grounded, that the world doesn't even know how to measure it. It doesn't roar. It doesn't demand to be seen. It doesn't force itself into rooms or fight for air. It doesn't armor itself with sharp words or postures of dominance. This strength, the real one, does not resist the world. It lets the world pass through it. Because what bends does not break. What sees clearly does not cling. What knows its own soul has no need to prove it. We were taught that power is control, that to be strong is to grip tighter, talk louder, hold your ground, never yield. But this is the lie of the brittle ego, the terrified identity that has mistaken resistance for power, defensiveness for boundaries, and noise for presence. Real power, the kind that terrifies the insecure and liberates the aware, is found in surrender. Not surrender as defeat, surrender as mastery, surrender as the refusal to be disturbed by what does not belong to you. It is to look at chaos and not flinch, to look at provocation and not perform, to look at rejection and remain whole. Strength is when your peace no longer needs negotiation. Because when you stop needing the world to be different, you start becoming invincible in it. Imagine a river. It doesn't fight the rocks. It doesn't argue with the curves. It doesn't resist the mountain. It flows, cuts through, adapts, and eventually it shapes the world around it without needing permission. That is strength. Not force, but flow with direction. This isn't about weakness. This isn't about being passive. This is about the kind of unshakable clarity that no insult, no betrayal, no chaos can reach. Boundaries are not walls. They're clarity. And surrender is not silence. It's sovereignty. You don't become powerful by hardening your armor. You become powerful by knowing what to let in and what to let pass. You become powerful when you no longer need to defend your identity in every room, in every conflict, in every moment someone fails to validate you. Because validation is the currency of the false self. And the true self, the deep, timeless self, does not trade in that market. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And most people are being run by unconscious wounds disguised as standards, unresolved trauma disguised as preferences, and a fear of abandonment masquerading as strength. They think saying no is power, but it's not the no that matters. It's the energy behind it. Some people say no from fear, from bitterness, from pride. But real strength says no from love, from peace, from vision. Because true boundaries are not drawn with anger, they're drawn with clarity, and clarity does not shake. A boundary drawn in resentment will collapse at the first test. But a boundary drawn in self-worth will not even need explanation. This is the paradox. When you are truly powerful, you do not need to defend your power. And when you surrender the need to be perceived as strong, you become untouchable. Look around. We live in a culture of overcompensation. Everyone is performing strength, competing to be the loudest, the hardest, the most unbothered. It's all armor, all persona. But the most dangerous person in the room is not the one barking commands. It's the one who doesn't react, who doesn't need to, because reaction is slavery. If anyone can pull you into drama, control your emotion, trigger your defense, they own you. And until you surrender the ego's addiction to being right, being seen, being validated, you will be imprisoned by every petty situation life throws at you. This is not about avoiding confrontation. It's about elevating above it. Imagine this. You are walking through a storm, but inside you are still. No matter the wind, the noise, the people trying to provoke you, your energy remains sovereign. You have nothing to prove, no role to perform, no need to be understood by anyone who isn't willing to see beyond their own projections. This is not arrogance, this is clarity. And clarity is the highest form of love. You love yourself enough to not entertain what insults your peace. You love the moment enough to not distort it with resistance. You love the truth enough to surrender to it, even when it's not what your ego wants to hear. Because the ego always wants to win, but the soul wants to be free. And sometimes, to be free, you must surrender the war. You must stop fighting battles that only exist in your need to be seen a certain way. You must stop confusing reaction with relevance, resistance with importance, and anger with power. Let them misunderstand you, let them mislabel you, let them walk away thinking they won. Real strength doesn't need the last word. Real strength watches in silence, knowing time always reveals the truth. And the truth is this: you are not here to be everything to everyone. You are here to be true, even if that truth is inconvenient, even if it's lonely, even if it requires losing people who only loved your mask. The ones who cannot honor your boundaries were never honoring you, only their access to you. Let that access expire. Because what you tolerate, you teach. And what you surrender to, not from weakness, but from wisdom, becomes the gateway to your next level. You are not here to manage other people's projections. You're not here to fix what you didn't break. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are here to remember who you were before the world taught you to be afraid. Before you were taught that being soft meant being weak. Before you were taught that surrender was a synonym for losing. Because when you awaken to this truth, something radical happens. You stop reacting, you start responding. You stop clinging. You start choosing. You stop performing. You start living. And you realize that the most powerful thing you can do in this life is to walk away, not from people, not from problems, but from the inner compulsion to resist what simply is. Because only when you stop resisting can you start transforming. And in that transformation, you become terrifyingly free. Not free in the way people pretend to be, screaming independence from the rooftops while still shackled to every opinion, every rejection, every shift in someone else's mood. But truly free in a way that unsettles those still addicted to control. Because when you no longer need to grip the world to feel safe, you begin to move with it. You begin to feel the rhythm beneath the chaos, the wisdom inside the silence, the clarity underneath every collapse. You begin to trust the intelligence of surrender, that letting go is not abandoning your power, it's finally trusting it. That stillness is not passive, it is the posture of the initiated. The unbothered man is not apathetic. He is tuned to a higher frequency, one that sees beyond offense, beyond provocation, beyond ego games masquerading as communication. He does not need to shout over others to be heard, because silence is his volume. He does not need to defend every wound, because healing is his shield. He does not need to prove that he's above it, because he knows he is. This is the strength that comes when you stop resisting your own depth, when you stop fighting to stay surface level, just to be palatable to people who are terrified of your truth. Because when you surrender not to others but to yourself, your boundaries become sacred, not rigid, not reactive, sacred. They no longer arise from trauma, but from truth. They are not there to punish. They are there to protect the space in which your transformation unfolds. You no longer say no because you're angry. You say no because your vision is clear. You no longer distance yourself out of fear. You do it out of alignment. And you no longer entertain what disrupts your peace because your energy has become too refined to waste on the unworthy. This is not superiority. It's discernment. And discernment is the reward for those who have suffered enough to stop suffering unnecessarily. There comes a moment, subtle, quiet, profound, when you realize that not everything requires your energy. Not every slight needs a response. Not every challenge deserves your presence. You begin to choose your battles, not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you're protecting your evolution. You begin to walk away not because you're weak, but because you finally see. And what you see is that not everything broken needs fixing, and not every insult needs resolution. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Let them thrash. Let them poke. Let them beg for your reaction. Your silence is not absence. It is your presence elevated beyond reach. And when you dwell in that altitude, you realize something even more radical, that everything you once resisted, pain, betrayal, loss, judgment, was the forge. You were not breaking. You were being shaped. You were not being punished. You were being polished. Like the samurai sword folded over itself thousands of times in fire, your soul was being refined. Not to become harder but clearer, because clarity, not force, is the real blade. And once you have it, nothing external can pierce your internal peace. So let go of the need to resist everything that feels uncomfortable. Let go of the compulsion to defend every edge of your identity. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself so deeply that no misunderstanding can shake you. And that understanding is born in surrender. Surrender to what is. Surrender to what was. Surrender to what you cannot control, not with hopelessness, but with holy reverence. Because what you resist, you give power to. But what you allow, you rise above. This is the paradox. The ego can't comprehend that true strength is not found in resistance. It's found in the refusal to be imprisoned by what happens. You don't need to harden. You need to heal. You don't need to push back. You need to step aside. You don't need to prove you're untouchable. You need to become untouchable by no longer needing anything from anyone to feel whole. That is what boundaries born of surrender create wholeness. Not the kind you manufacture through pride or isolation, but the kind you return to when you remember who you truly are. You are not a reaction. You are not a role. You are not the identity others project onto you. You are the awareness beneath it all. The sky, not the storm. The witness, not the wound. And when you live from that place, from the deep, unmoved stillness at the center of your being, you no longer chase peace. You are peace. And from that peace, your boundaries become effortless. Not because you're guarded, but because you're anchored. Not because you're afraid of being hurt, but because you're no longer available for what dishonors your growth. This is not the strength of the world, this is the strength of the self-reclaimed. And once you taste it, there is no going back, because you will have remembered the secret they never wanted you to know, that you were never weak for surrendering. You were only ever afraid of your own power. And once you touch that power knot, the loud, performative kind, but the silent, terrifying kind that requires no witness, you begin to change in ways the old you could never fathom. The change is not sudden, it is not dramatic, it is subtle, like a tectonic shift deep beneath the surface, quiet, unstoppable. The moment you stop resisting the world and begin surrendering to your own truth, your inner axis starts to realign. The noise fades, the compulsions lose their grip, and slowly you begin to live from a place of presence rather than programming. You begin to notice the space between stimulus and response, and in that space you reclaim yourself. Where once you would flare up, now you breathe. Where once you would chase, now you pause. Where once you would collapse into pleasing, proving, performing, now you remain still, not as a strategy, but as your nature. This is how you become untouchable, not by escaping the world, but by ceasing to be defined by it. The transformation is not external, it's internal, and it's irreversible. Because once your nervous system learns the feeling of peace that isn't dependent on validation, drama becomes boring. Once your heart knows the silence that doesn't crave applause, attention begins to feel like noise. And once your soul remembers its own voice, the voices of others no longer dictate your direction. But this change comes at a cost. You will have to let go of identities you once clung to like armor. You will have to watch versions of yourself die, versions built in reaction, in fear, in the desperate need to belong. The persona that needed to be liked. The mask that played strong while hiding the wounds. The role that overgave to be needed. All of them will fall away. Not because you rejected them, but because they are no longer necessary. This is the quiet grief of awakening, saying goodbye to the self you built to survive, so the self who was born to live can emerge. And that emergence, it is not always glorious. It's awkward, lonely, disorienting. Because when you stop performing for the world no longer knows how to engage with you. People don't know how to dance with someone who no longer moves to their tune. But this is where your real power grows in the void, in the space where the old patterns used to play, in the silence where reactions used to scream, in the stillness where anxiety once demanded motion. You begin to notice a new rhythm, slower, truer, aligned not with urgency, but with clarity. You no longer rush to fix discomfort. You sit in it, knowing it is your teacher. You no longer reach to defend yourself. You watch, knowing truth doesn't need a lawyer. You no longer try to control outcomes. You act your line and then you release because you trust. You trust not in fantasy, but in reality. In the truth that what is meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself. And what isn't, no matter how beautiful or promising, will rot the moment you compromise your peace to hold on to it. So you let go, not because you're giving up, but because you're waking up to the sacredness of your own energy, waking up to the fact that not everything deserves access, waking up to the inner authority that no longer negotiates with chaos. This is not the performance of strength, it is the embodiment of it. Because when you live in alignment, boundaries aren't walls you build in fear. They are filters that keep your field clean. You no longer scream your worth, you become it. You no longer protect your peace like a fragile thing, you carry it like a sword, and simply walk away from what would tarnish it. And with each moment of choosing yourself not from ego, but from essence, you reinforce the signal that your life is no longer on sale. That your time, your space, your presence, your heart are not up for grabs by those who cannot meet them with reverence. You stop inviting chaos to your table just because it knocks with charm. You stop giving explanations to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop leaking energy through apologies you don't mean, conversations you don't need, and identities you no longer wear. And all of this comes not from resistance, but from surrender. Surrender to what you feel. Surrender to what you see. Surrender to what is, so you can finally stop reacting and start responding not to the world's expectations, but to your soul's instruction. And your soul never yells, it never begs, it never rushes. It waits in stillness, quietly drawing you back into yourself. And when you begin to live from that place, from the place of still power, surrendered truth, and sacred boundaries, life begins to shape around you differently. Not because the world changes, but because you have, and your change shifts the signal. People treat you differently, not because you demanded it, but because you now expect it without needing to speak it. You no longer tolerate disrespect, not because you're angry, but because your energy simply won't allow it to land. You no longer engage in battles, not because you're passive, but because your vision is too focused to be distracted. You no longer fight to be understood, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand yourself. And that is the only understanding that ever truly mattered. And now you stand here not at the end, but at the beginning of a life no longer built on noise, but on knowing. A life where your power is not proved, but felt in every step you take away from what dims you, and every breath you draw in the presence of your own peace. You are not who you were. You are not who they needed you to be. You are not the sum of your reactions, your scars, your old patterns. You are the stillness beneath the story. And from that stillness, you've remembered what they tried to make you forget. That your strength was never in how tightly you could grip. It was in how gracefully you could let go. It was never in how loud you could roar. It was in how quietly you could stand. It was never in how many battles you could win. It was in how many battles you could walk away from and still feel whole. Because the highest form of power is not domination, it is sovereignty. And sovereignty is born in surrender. Not surrender to them, not surrender to fear, but surrender to your own truth. A truth that now lives in every boundary you hold without guilt. In every no, you speak with love, without explanation. In every storm you walk through without needing to raise your voice to prove you are unmoved. You are the storm and the calm beneath it. You are the fire and the hand that controls its burn. You are the gatekeeper of your own energy now. And your life, this one wild, sacred life, is no longer a reaction to what happens. It is a response to who you truly are. So stand up. In your stillness, in your softness, in your silent, unwavering power. Not to resist the world, but to let it pass through you and leave you untouched. Because strength isn't resistance, it's surrender with boundaries. And you finally, fully, irrevocably have become the embodiment of both.